ZeP111 Frozen assets. The line Europe may regret crossing. Sanctions are designed to freeze money. Confiscation goes much further because it rewrites the rules of the system itself. And tonight, Europe is standing directly on that line. Act 1. The Freeze. In February 2022, Western governments took an extraordinary financial step. They froze roughly 210 billion euros belonging to the Central Bank of Russia. This money did not belong to private individuals or corporations. It belongs directly to the Russian state. The assets were held inside Western financial institutions. They were not seized. They were not confiscated. They were frozen under wartime sanctions, which made the move legal. The reasoning behind the decision was straightforward. By freezing Russia's reserves, the West cut Moscow off from its own money. It prevented Russia from using those funds to stabilize its currency. It restricted its ability to move capital internationally. Most importantly, it preserved leverage for future negotiations. The money itself did not disappear. It remained exactly where it was. Inside European banks and clearing systems, Russia simply lost access to it. Freezing assets is a recognized tool of economic sanctions. It's designed to be temporary. It's designed to be reversible. And it operates within established international law. At least that was the assumption at the time. Act 2. The Shift. 3 years later, the situation looked very different. The war did not end quickly. Costs continued to rise, and Ukraine's financial needs grew dramatically. By 2025, Ukraine required 135 billion euros simply to survive through 2027. European leaders promised continued support. They committed to covering Ukraine's financial shortfall, but political reality intervened. European taxpayers were increasingly reluctant to shoulder the full burden. That is when a new idea began circulating in Brussels. Why not use Russia's own frozen money? On the surface, the idea sounded efficient and politically attractive. Russia had caused the destruction. Russia's assets were already immobilized. So why should European taxpayers pay instead?
The UK's armed forces have warned a shadow of war looms over Europe unless it can deter Vladimir Putin's ambitions. Russia's central bank is suing Belgian bank Euroclear over the EU's plan to use frozen Russian assets to support Ukraine.
However, what sounded practical quickly becomes controversial. It became one of the most serious tests of international financial law in decades. Germany's Chancellor Friedrich Merz proposed a massive loan. The loan would be backed entirely by frozen Russian central bank assets. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen strongly supported the plan.
We have very strong safeguards in place to protect member states and to reduce the risks as much as possible. For example, to ensure that an illegitimate award outside the Union cannot be enforced inside the Union. And very important, we have created a very strong solidarity mechanism where in the very end the Union can intervene, because we want to make very sure to all our member states, but specifically also to Belgium, that one thing is for sure: we will share the burden in a fair way, as it is the European way.
She presented it as an act of justice, making Russia pay for the destruction it caused in Ukraine. Legal experts heard something else entirely. They heard the sound of a legal boundary being crossed. Freezing assets is temporary, confiscation is permanent, and the difference between the two changes everything. Act 3. The legal line. International law protects something called sovereign immunity for a very specific reason. Central bank reserves are not treated like normal assets. They are not investments seeking profit. They are not political tools by design. They are the foundation of a country's financial stability. Central bank reserves are used to defend currencies. They are used to pay for essential imports. They are used to calm markets during crisis. Because of this role, international law draws a very clear line. During conflicts, assets may be frozen, but they may not be confiscated. Freezing preserves ownership. Confiscation destroys it. That distinction has never been tested at this scale, not in modern global finance. When President Vladimir Putin reacted, his language was harsh. He called the plan outright theft. He warned it would destroy confidence in the Eurozone. Moscow threatened retaliation if a single ruble was touched. But Europe's most serious problem did not come from Moscow. It came from inside Europe itself. Act 4. Belgium, the pressure point. Most of the frozen Russian assets are not spread across Europe. They are concentrated in one place, Belgium, specifically inside a financial clearinghouse called Euroclear, based in Brussels. Roughly 185 billion euros sits there. Overnight, Belgium became the custodian of the most dangerous pile of money in Europe. Belgian Prime Minister Mark de Wever immediately pushed back. He argued that confiscating sovereign assets during an active war was unprecedented.
Well, I'm looking forward to the discussion on the immobilized assets, not the frozen assets. There's a big difference, the sovereign assets. There's the idea of confiscating them to give them to Ukraine. I'm looking for the legal basis for this decision. This is not a detail. Even during the Second World War, immobilized assets were never touched. So this is a very important step if we would like to take it. We have three demands. I want a full mutualization of the risk, because there is a big risk. We will suffer from enormous claims. So if we want to do this, we will have to do this all together. We want guarantees if the money has to be paid back, that every member state will chip in. The consequences cannot only be for Belgium. And the third demand is that every country who has immobilized assets moves together with us, because we are the only ones. Euroclear is the only financial institution that offers the windfall profits to Ukraine. We know that there are vast amounts of Russian money in other countries who have always been silent about this. If we move, we must move all together. That's European solidarity.
International law, he said, handles such matters only after wars end. Through peace treaties, through settlements, Belgium faced an even more frightening calculation. Russia threatened legal claims worth 140 billion euros. That is roughly 1/3 of Belgium's entire economy. Belgium refused to carry that risk alone. Its banking federation issued urgent warnings. If investors believe sovereign assets can be seized for political reasons, capital will leave, trust will collapse, and Belgium's role as a financial center would be permanently damaged. Act 5. France, the quiet contradiction. France also holds Russian assets, roughly 18 billion euros, parked inside French private banks. Publicly, Paris supported the idea of using frozen Russian money for Ukraine. But when attention turned to French territory, the tone changed. France refused to include its own holdings. Officials cited contractual protections and legal structures. Different rules, they said. In reality, France understood exactly what Belgium understood. Being the jurisdiction where seizure occurs carries enormous risk. France endorsed the principle but avoided the liability. Solidarity was spoken. Risk was not shared equally. Act 6. Why sovereign immunity exists. To understand why this debate matters globally, you must understand why sovereign immunity exists in the first place. Countries store reserves abroad because they trust the system. They trust the law overrides politics. They trust the assets will not be seized arbitrarily. Remove that trust and reserve storage becomes a gamble, not a legal certainty. Even during wars, this rule has been respected. Break it once, and the consequences spread globally. Act 7. The precedent cascade. The danger here is not Russia. The danger is precedent. Once one central bank loses immunity, every future conflict becomes justification. Today, it is Russia. Tomorrow, it could be someone else. Capital responds not with outrage, but with exit. Act 8. When sanctions stop working. Sanctions work only when rules are predictable. Confiscation destroys predictability. States stop complying. They start avoiding exposure. This is how sanctions lose power. Act 9. The global reaction. China noticed immediately. So did sovereign wealth funds across the global south. If Russia's reserves are not safe, whose reserves are? Act 10. The meaning of this moment. Europe holds 210 billion euros. That money could shape peace or destroys trust in European finance. This moment will be remembered not for the money, but for the rules that were kept or broken. Power without trust collapses. Credibility never freezes, it flees. And this is a Zircon Show. In case we don't see you, good morning, good afternoon, and good night.